Mr. Metho, thank you very much for your testimony. Mr. Akwei.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Representative Bass, Amnesty International continues to look forward to working with you and to thank you for your leadership on behalf of the issues in Africa as well as on human rights. I'm going to be very, very brief because I know that we're running out of time. I think the panelists who spoke before me have already said that this is a window of opportunity and that it's closing fast. This is an opportunity not only for change in Ethiopia, but also for change here in Washington in terms of U.S. policy towards the country. What we have seen, not only in Ethiopia, but in other parts of the world, is that history shows that governments tend to harden as opposed to soften if they are not, if they do not seize the opportunity for reform at the beginning, at the start. And so I would urge that this committee and Congress push the administration to recalibrate and to revisit what it is exactly is going on in Ethiopia, what the government's genuine commitment in Ethiopia is to human rights and the rule of law, all of which are going to be critical and essential in terms of its future, whether as a democracy or, as the first panelist said, whether it's the alternative future, which nobody here wants. I would also say that there are many levers that the United States has not yet used in terms of its pressure of applying or challenging the Addis Ababa regime to meet its human rights obligations. For example, the Ethiopian government is a party to the ICCPR, to the Geneva Conventions, to the Convention Against Torture, to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. The Ethiopian government is also a party to the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance. All of these are very clear in what governments are supposed to do in terms of creating free and fair conditions and basic accountability by the ruling government to respect human rights and free expression. Despite that, the Ethiopian constitution also has at least 30 human rights provisions in it that speak to fundamental freedoms and rights. Despite this, the litany of human rights concerns and abuses is sadly very depressing. And these are issues that are not only reported by Amnesty International, but by other human rights groups and the United States Department of State, which puts out its annual human rights report. Very specifically, issues of freedom of expression, crackdowns on human rights defenders, torture and ill treatment, which you mentioned earlier, the conflict in the Somali region, which my colleagues have also referred to, the issue of villagization. But the others are even more profound. For example, the lack of effective institutions. The Ethiopian judiciary continues to lack independence and resources, and as has been illustrated in recent trials, is not yet a guarantor of rights or justice for the Ethiopian people. The National Human Rights Commission is also severely lacking independence. Amnesty International believes that political will is the biggest obstacle to effective, independent human rights and democratic institutions, and while the current political mind frame of the government remains unchanged, it will be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for effective institutions to exist and to operate. The final human rights concern that I would like to raise, obviously, is as precedent, and that has already been discussed, the 2005 elections and the crackdown that happened afterwards. Those are not things that were ever accounted for. The numbers were never fully clarified, and certainly there was never accountability. Those are things that this government still is accountable for and has to answer to. I would just go finally to close to just try and remember that we're dealing with human beings and individuals, lots of them, but indeed precious in their individuality. Eskinder Nega, Debebe Eshetu, Youssef Getchu, Akmel Negash, Yishak Eshetu, Tesamagan Desalgan. All of these are just a few of the names of Ethiopian heroes who are challenging and fighting for individual rights and the rule of law in their country, who have suffered the brunt of the government's crackdown and its repression. There are thousands more like them, and some of them we don't even have the names on. Mr. Chairman, we believe that without the full enjoyment of human rights by all Ethiopians, it will be hard to see how the country will fulfill the promise of individual freedom and dignity that it has claimed to espouse since the ouster of Mengistu in 1991. Since 2005, The human rights situation in the country has deteriorated further with significantly increased restrictions on freedom of association, expression, and other rights. As I said, and as Chairman Smith also noted, this has not happened in a vacuum, and the international community is also in need of looking deeply into its policies and changing them. The failure to speak out and press for change by the Ethiopian government is critical, and it has allowed Ethiopia to set a dangerous example for other governments in the region and has kept the Ethiopian people themselves at risk of human rights violations and repressive governance. We hope that the President will speak to some of these issues on his upcoming trip to the continent, in particular the issue of civil society and the important and legitimate role that it plays in a healthy democracy and in the enjoyment of human rights by citizens and peoples in a particular country. But we also hope that the discussion of legislation and of policies that are being conducted by the Meles regime, by the post-Meles regime, including the Anti-Terrorism Proclamation, the Charities and Societies Proclamation, and other laws, will also continue to be raised not only by Congress, but also by the administration. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony.